Do not call the police yet. Victoria Hayes said it so quietly that Blake Donovan stopped with his thumb already hovering over his phone. On the security monitor in front of them, the midnight blue glow of the server room washed over a man in a gray maintenance uniform, his shoulders bent, his face half hidden beneath the brim of a faded cap. Ethan Caldwell, night custodian, single father, the man most executives passed every morning without learning his name, had just used an override key to enter the most restricted floor of Hayes Meridian. It was 11:47 p.m. Rain dragged silver lines down the glass walls of the 32nd floor, and the whole building seemed to hold its breath. Blake leaned closer to the screen, his expensive watch flashing beneath the control room light. "There is your thief," he said. "I told you something was wrong. He has been accessing protected files for weeks." Victoria did not answer. She watched Ethan set a canvas workbag on the floor with careful hands. He did not look like a criminal. He looked tired, the kind of tired money could not understand. He opened the bag, and Blake inhaled sharply, expecting a laptop, a hard drive, some piece of evidence that would make the night simple. But the first thing Ethan removed was a small cloth doll with yellow yarn hair and one missing button. He placed it gently on top of the server cabinet, as if it mattered, as if someone had trusted him to keep it safe. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and second chances, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we are glad you are here. Now, back to Ethan Caldwell. On the monitor, Ethan knelt beside an open panel, not rushing, not hiding from the cameras, not even glancing over his shoulder. His fingers moved with strange confidence, reading wires and ports the way a musician reads sheet music. Victoria felt a quiet unease settle behind her ribs. She had built a company on instinct, numbers, and control, but this was not adding up. A thief took. A desperate man panicked. Ethan didn't either. He worked in silence, paused once to cough into his sleeve, then pulled a folded paper from his shirt pocket. Victoria zoomed in. It was not a company document. It was a child's drawing, done in purple crayon, showing a stick figure girl in a hospital bed and a tall man holding a toolbox. Across the top, in uneven letters, were the words, "Daddy fixes broken things." Blake scoffed. Emotional prop. People like him always have a story. Victoria turned her head slowly. People like him? Blake stiffened, then smiled with practiced ease. Low-level employees with access. That is all I mean. But his voice had moved too quickly, too smoothly. On the screen, Ethan closed the server panel, wiped the edge of the cabinet with his sleeve, and returned the little doll to his bag. Then he did something that made Victoria lean forward. He placed a small flash drive into a sealed envelope, wrote 3 words across it, and left it on the server desk. The camera was too far away to read them. "Enough," Blake said. "Security can pick him up downstairs." "No," Victoria replied. "I want to know where he goes." "Victoria, that is not wise. Neither is judging a man before the truth has spoken." 10 minutes later, she was in her black sedan, following Ethan's old pickup through the wet streets of downtown Chicago. The city changed mile by mile. Glass towers became shuttered shops. Bright avenues became narrow roads lined with tired brick buildings and flickering streetlights. Ethan stopped once at a 24-hour pharmacy, came out with a small white bag, and gave his last few dollar bills to a woman counting coins at the register. Then he drove on. Victoria's hands tightened around the steering wheel. At 12:26 a.m., Ethan turned into the cracked parking lot of St. Agnes Children's Clinic, a faded brick building with one broken sign and an emergency light blinking weakly over the entrance. He stepped out into the rain, grabbed his toolbox, and hurried inside. Through the front windows, Victoria saw a little girl in pajamas run toward her, thin arms reaching out. Ethan dropped to one knee and caught her like she was the only treasure the world had ever given him. Then an elderly nurse pointed toward a dark hallway where the clinic lights were failing. Ethan kissed the child's forehead, lifted his tools, and followed. Victoria sat frozen in the car, rain whispering over the windshield. She had followed a suspect. But what she found was a father. 12 hours earlier, before the rain, before the security monitor, before Victoria Hayes followed an old pickup into a part of Chicago she had not visited since childhood, Ethan Caldwell was on his knees in the lobby of Hayes Meridian, wiping spilled coffee from the marble floor while 3 executives stepped around him as if he were a chair someone had forgotten to move. The morning rush poured through the glass doors in waves of perfume, leather briefcases, polished shoes, and impatience. Sunlight broke across the 30-foot windows and made the lobby shine like a cathedral built for money, but Ethan kept his eyes on the floor. He had learned that men in his position survived by staying useful, quiet, and small. "Careful, Caldwell," a young department manager said, lifting his designer shoe over the wet patch. "This is why we have warning signs. Try not to make the floor more dangerous than the market." A few people laughed. Ethan placed the yellow sign beside the spill and said nothing. Another voice came from behind him. "Hey, invisible guy with keys, conference room 12 needs trash bags." Ethan looked up just long enough to nod. "I will take care of it." "Of course you will," the manager said. "That is the whole job." The words landed where cruel words often land, not on the skin, but somewhere deeper, where a tired man stores the things he refuses to hand back. Ethan did not correct him. He did not tell him he knew more about electrical systems than half the engineers upstairs. He did not mention the years he had spent designing medical equipment before grief rearranged his life. He simply wrung out the mop, folded the rag, and moved with the same steady grace he had carried through every hard season. Across the lobby, Victoria Hayes stepped from her private elevator with Blake Donovan beside her, reviewing numbers on a tablet. She heard the laughter. She saw Ethan kneeling beside the spill. For one brief second, her eyes met his. His were calm, not defeated, not angry, just quiet. Victoria paused, but Blake kept talking. The Asian market call moved to 9:30. "The board packet is ready. Also, we need to discuss the server irregularities." Victoria looked away and continued walking. That small choice would return to her later with weight. Near the reception desk, a summer intern hurried past with a stack of folders, and a silver hair clip slipped from her coat pocket. It hit the floor, bounced twice, and disappeared beneath a bench. No one noticed except Ethan. He reached under, picked it up, wiped dust from it with the edge of his sleeve, and placed it carefully on the desk where she would find it. The receptionist barely glanced at him. "Thanks, Ethan." "Yes, ma'am." By noon, he had cleaned 3 conference rooms, unclogged a sink on the 21st floor, replaced a buzzing fluorescent tube near legal, and fixed the copier in human resources after 2 technicians had blamed the machine and left. At 1:23 p.m., he stood alone in the maintenance closet and opened a small metal locker. Inside there was no lunch, no sandwich, no coffee, only a folded hospital bill, a bottle of children's heart medication, a photo of Maddie in a purple winter hat, and the cloth doll with yellow yarn hair tucked gently beside his work gloves. Ethan touched the photo with 2 fingers. In the picture, Maddie was smiling without showing her teeth, holding a crayon drawing of her father with a toolbox. On the back, in letters that leaned uphill, she had written, "Daddy fixes broken things, even hearts." Ethan breathed in slowly, closed the locker, and returned to work before anyone could see what the quiet man was carrying. By 5 o'clock, the lobby had emptied into the softer rhythm of evening, the kind of quiet that came after ambition had gone home and left its crumbs behind. Ethan Caldwell pushed his cart through the executive floor, collecting paper cups, straightening chairs, erasing fingerprints from glass walls that reflected a city turning gold beneath the sunset. His phone buzzed once in his pocket. He pulled it out near the service elevator and read the message from St. Agnes. "Children's Clinic. Maddie waited for you before taking her medicine. Also, monitor 3 is failing again." He closed his eyes for half a second, not long enough for anyone to call it pain, just long enough for a father to gather himself. Then he typed back, "Tell her I am coming. I will bring the call." At 7:15, while the last analysts packed their laptops, Ethan entered a storage closet behind the server corridor and removed a small replacement board wrapped in brown paper. He had bought it used from a medical salvage store in Joliet, $43 cash, no warranty, no receipt that mattered. To anyone else, it looked like scrap. To Ethan, it might keep a child's heart monitor breathing through another night. That was when Blake Donovan saw him. Blake stood at the far end of the corridor, half hidden beside the frosted glass wall, his expression smooth as polished stone. "Working late again, Caldwell." Ethan paused. "Yes, sir. You have a lot of keys for a man who empties trash." "Only the ones they gave me." Blake smiled. "And yet doors keep opening." Ethan held his gaze, calm and tired. Doors are meant to open when something needs fixing. Blake's smile thinned. Be careful what you fix. Ethan did not answer. He simply tucked the package into his canvas bag and continued down the hall. 2 floors above, Victoria Hayes watched from her office as Blake entered, carrying a folder thick with printed access logs. His voice was grave, his timing perfect. We have a problem. Someone is using maintenance credentials to enter restricted systems after hours. Victoria scanned the pages. Ethan Caldwell's name appeared again and again, always late, always near the server room, always quiet as a shadow. Why was I not told sooner? She asked. Because I wanted proof before I accused a single father, Blake replied, almost gently. But compassion cannot become weakness. Those words stayed with her, not because they were wise, but because they sounded rehearsed. At 11:47 p.m., she saw the monitor, the server room, the little doll, the envelope, the drawing, and the man everyone had stepped over, moving like someone trying to save something, not steal it. And at 12:03 a.m., Victoria followed him into the rain. Ethan's pickup rattled through downtown, its left taillight dim, its rear bumper held by a strip of silver tape. Victoria kept 2 cars behind, feeling foolish, powerful, and strangely afraid all at once. He stopped at a pharmacy on West Madison Street and came out with Maddie's medication in one hand. At the register, an older woman in a faded coat counted nickels for a bottle of antibiotics. Ethan looked at the floor, then quietly paid the difference before she could protest. No speech, no performance, just Grace with calloused hands. Then he drove to St. Agnes, where the sign flickered like a tired prayer. Inside, the nurse at the front desk looked up and smiled with relief. Thank goodness, Mr. Caldwell. Your daughter waited for you before taking her medicine. A small girl in purple pajamas ran down the hallway, dragging the cloth doll by one arm. Daddy, Maddie called, breathless and bright. Did you bring the piece to fix the machine? Ethan dropped to one knee and opened his arms. I did, sweetheart. Victoria stood outside in the rain, watching through the clinic window as every suspicion in her heart began to fall apart. Victoria Hayes stayed outside St. Agnes Children's Clinic for almost a full minute, one hand still resting on the door handle of her sedan, rain tapping against her coat like small, patient questions. Through the front window, she watched Ethan Caldwell lift Maddie into his arms with a tenderness so natural it made the fluorescent hallway feel warmer than it was. The little girl pressed her cheek against his shoulder. The cloth doll hung from her hand, yellow yarn hair damp at the ends. You took the medicine? Ethan asked softly. Maddie looked away. Almost. That means no. That means I was waiting. He smiled, but Victoria saw the worry behind it. The kind of man learns to hide so his child can keep believing the world is safe. Nurse Ruth Bellamy, a silver-haired woman with tired eyes and sturdy shoes, led him down the hall. Monitor 3 went dark twice in 20 minutes, she said. The replacement request was denied again. Ethan set Maddie gently on a padded chair beside the nurse's station and opened his canvas bag. Then we will keep this one alive a little longer. Victoria finally stepped inside. The clinic smelled of antiseptic, old paper, and rainwater tracked across worn linoleum. No one looked at her as a chief executive officer. No one recognized the tailored coat, the diamond watch, the woman from magazine covers and boardroom portraits. Here, she was only another stranger standing near the door, and for the first time that night, invisibility felt like an education. Ethan knelt beside the heart monitor, removed the back panel, and laid the screws in a perfect line on a paper towel. His hands changed when he worked. In the office towers, those hands emptied trash, carried mop buckets, replaced light bulbs, and cleaned the evidence of other people's comfort. Here, they moved like instruments of quiet authority, wire by wire, port by port, breath by breath. Maddie watched him with proud, sleepy eyes. Daddy, yes, sweetheart. Why do people at your work not know you are smart? Ethan paused only long enough for the question to settle. Nurse Ruth glanced at him, then looked away, as if she had heard too much truth from children to interrupt it. Ethan smiled without sadness, because being useful matters more than being known. Maddie frowned. But I want them to know. One day, maybe. What if they are mean first? He tightened a connector with careful fingers. Then we stay kind first. Victoria felt those words pass through her like a bell struck in an empty room. She had spent years believing leadership meant being the loudest certainty in the building. Ethan Caldwell, in a hallway with cracked paint and a broken machine, made her wonder whether real strength might be quieter than command. The monitor flickered. Once, twice. Then the green line returned, steady and alive. Nurse Ruth let out a breath. Maddie clapped softly, too tired for much more. You fixed it. Ethan leaned back on his heels. For tonight. That was when Victoria saw it. On the lower corner of the machine, beneath a strip of peeling tape, was the silver-blue emblem of her own company, Hayes Meridian Medical Systems. Her own signature product line. Her own abandoned warranty program. Her own budget cut, dressed up years ago as strategic restructuring. She stepped closer, unable to stop herself. This equipment is ours, she whispered. Ethan looked up at her for the first time, his face calm but guarded. Nurse Ruth blinked. Ma'am, visiting hours are over. Victoria did not move. The monitor beeped softly between them, steady as a child's second chance. Ethan rose slowly, holding the old replacement board in one hand. Then you know why it should have lasted longer, he said. And in that small, failing clinic, surrounded by children no balance sheet had ever loved, Victoria Hayes understood that she had not followed a thief into the night. She had followed the consequence of her own company's silence. Victoria left St. Agnes with the sound of that heart monitor still following her, one soft beep at a time, as if the old machine had learned how to accuse without raising its voice. By 2:14 a.m., she was back inside Hayes Meridian, the building almost empty except for security guards, cleaning carts, and the low electric hum of a company that never truly slept. Her heels clicked across the executive floor, slower than usual. Blake Donovan's folder of accusations sat on her desk, neat, confident, and suddenly too perfect. Victoria opened her laptop and entered the archive system herself. She searched Ethan Caldwell. At first, she found what Blake wanted her to find. Maintenance badge access, server entries after hours, copied technical files, flagged activity attached to his employee number. But Victoria had built her life reading what powerful men hoped women would not question, and something beneath the surface felt wrong. She searched deeper. Old contracts, deleted project folders, internal medical division records from 6 years earlier. Then she found it. Caldwell, Ethan James, contracted systems engineer, Hayes Meridian Medical Systems. Victoria froze. Not custodian. Not just maintenance. Systems engineer. The file opened with a photograph of a younger Ethan wearing a blue button-down shirt, standing beside a prototype children's cardiac monitor, one hand resting shyly on the device, as if he did not want credit even when a camera asked for it. The project name was Brightline Pediatric Access Program. Its purpose was simple enough to sound impossible. Low-cost, long-life medical monitors for rural and inner-city children's clinics. Victoria scrolled through the notes. Ethan had redesigned the power board to last longer. He had simplified replacement parts so local volunteers could repair them. He had reduced projected maintenance costs by 68%. And then, 3 months before launch, the program had been suspended. Reason: limited profitability. Final approving executive, Blake Donovan. Victoria leaned back, the city lights trembling in the windows behind her. No, she whispered. But the truth does not become smaller because it is inconvenient. She opened the attachments. There were emails from Ethan, each one measured, respectful, almost painfully humble. Please reconsider the support program. These units are operating in clinics that cannot afford service contracts. Children will lose access if we discontinue parts. Another email, 2 weeks later. Put my name nowhere if that helps. Just build it. Another. I do not care who gets credit. Just do not let children die because they are poor. Victoria read that line twice. Then a third time. The office felt colder than before. She searched Blake's executive correspondence and found the gaps first, then the pattern. Files Ethan had created were copied under a private development code. Design elements had been transferred into a confidential negotiation package. A rival medical technology firm had received preview documents through a shell consultant Blake controlled. And now, after all those years, the same stolen design was being sold again, with Ethan's maintenance credentials used as the perfect scapegoat. The room was silent except for Victoria's breathing and the soft buzz of the screen. She opened the sealed envelope Ethan had left in the server room. Inside was the flash drive and a handwritten note in plain block letters. For the children. Not for me. On the drive was a log Ethan had built quietly, carefully, without drama. Every false access route. Every copied file. Every timestamp. That placed Blake's private account inside the theft long before Ethan's badge was ever used. Victoria covered her mouth, not from fear, but from shame. She had followed a poor single father expecting to discover his crime. Instead, she had discovered the graveyard where her company had buried his mercy. As dawn began to gray the edge of Chicago, Victoria printed everything, placed it in a black folder, and wrote one word across the front: truth. By 8:30 that morning, Hayes Meridian looked awake again, but Victoria Hayes knew the building was only pretending. Coffee carts rolled through the lobby, elevators chimed, shoes crossed marble, and every polished surface reflected the same perfect lie. That power was clean because it wore a suit. In her office, the black folder marked truth rested beneath her hand. Across from her, Blake Donovan stood with a smile sharpened by confidence. "The board is assembled," he said. "I thought it would be best to handle the Caldwell situation quickly, before he damages the company further." Victoria looked up slowly. She had not slept. The edges of her eyes showed it, but her voice did not. "You called the board without my approval." Blake's smile did not move. "I protected your company." "My company," she repeated. "Interesting."